It's you?" His voice cut through the city noise like a whip. The man in the tailored suit froze mid-step. On the cold pavement before him sat a woman with 2 children. Her eyes flinched with recognition but slid away in shame. He stepped closer, and the crowd around them seemed to hold its breath. She flinched, lifting her hand as if to shield herself from a blow. His face burned with fury, not at the humiliation, but at the fact that she still feared him. The children clung to her dress, wide-eyed, sensing the storm but not understanding it. "Why are you here? Why with them?" His voice broke, strangled with questions. Her lips trembled but no words came. Then, from the edge of the crowd, a raspy voice shouted, "I know everything about her." And heads turned instantly. The man's pulse hammered in his temples. He scanned the faces, searching for the source, but the crowd shifted uneasily, people whispering, phones already raised to record. He clenched his jaw, fighting to keep control. The woman lowered her head further, pulling the children closer, as if the pavement could swallow them whole. "You owe me an answer," he pressed, his tone sharper, lower, almost begging yet threatening in the same breath. The woman shook her head quickly, eyes darting toward the side street. He caught the movement. She wanted to escape. That, more than silence, pierced him. The crowd buzzed louder, sensing scandal. A middle-aged man pushed forward, pointing at the twins. "Ask her whose they are. Go on, ask." The man in the suit froze. His chest heaved, his fingers tightened around the leather briefcase he still carried. He had walked into negotiations that morning certain of victory, now he stood before a battlefield he couldn't name. "Don't," she whispered finally, so soft it barely reached him. "Not here." Her eyes glistened, not with weakness, but with something harder, defiance, or desperation, he couldn't tell. It unsettled him more than her tears. "Then when?" he shot back, stepping closer until only the children stood between them. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. The twins stared at him, one with fear, the other with strange, searching curiosity. He felt the weight of their gaze like a verdict he wasn't prepared to face. The rasping voice rose again from somewhere behind the crowd, "Tell him the truth, or I will." The woman flinched violently. The man in the suit spun around, scanning faces, rage and confusion twisting inside him. Whoever had spoken wasn't just a heckler, they knew something. His heart pounded as he turned back to her. She was trembling, clutching the children as if her grip alone could keep the world from collapsing. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. And yet, he couldn't walk away. He stepped closer, forcing the woman to lift her head. Their eyes locked, a silent battlefield. His breath was sharp, hers ragged. The children pressed against her, small shields between two worlds colliding. "You don't walk away this time," he said, his voice steel. The words weren't loud, but the crowd heard them. Phones tilted higher, people leaning in. She blinked, her lips parting, but instead of an answer she pulled the children to their feet. "No," he said, blocking her path, arm outstretched. "Not until I know." The authority in his tone, the certainty, returned for the first time in years. It was a decision, he wouldn't let her disappear again. Not like before. She froze, torn between fight and flight. Then a shout cut through the murmurs, "Police! Clear the street!" The crowd shifted, panic rippling through. Blue lights flickered at the far end of the avenue. Someone had called them. Phones vanished into pockets, whispers turned to hurried steps. The man clenched his jaw. He had minutes at best. If they were split apart now, she would vanish, and the questions would rot inside him forever. His choice was brutal but simple. He seized her wrist. "We finish this now," he hissed. She gasped, trying to pull back, but the children's frightened cries trapped her. "Let me go," her voice cracked, but he didn't loosen his grip. The crowd surged, pushing them toward the curb. A car horn blared, the chaos swelling. "Stop," she shouted, loud enough to turn heads. Her eyes blazed, not broken now but furious. "If you want answers, then you'll have to face what you left behind." The word struck harder than any blow. His grip faltered, and in that second, one of the children slipped free, darting into the street. Gasps echoed as a delivery truck screeched its brakes, tires screaming against asphalt. The boy froze in the headlights. The man dropped the briefcase and lunged. The truck screeched, rubber burning, the boy frozen in its path. At the last second, the man dove forward, arms out, yanking the child against his chest as the vehicle shuddered to a stop inches away. The crowd erupted, shouts, curses, a wave of phones filming the chaos. His heart thundered as he clutched the boy, his suit smeared with dust and grime. The woman staggered toward them, pulling the second child close, her face pale. For a moment their eyes met again, but this time it wasn't fear he saw, it was rage. "You don't get to play the hero now," she spat. The words cut deeper than the near miss. Police sirens wailed louder, closer. The man stood, still holding the boy, refusing to let go. He turned to her, voice low and urgent. "If you run now, I'll find you. But you will tell me the truth." She shook her head violently, trembling, but before she could answer, a hand gripped his shoulder. "Sir, step aside," a calm but firm voice ordered. A police officer, tall, broad, eyes sharp with recognition. "We'll handle this." The man narrowed his eyes. Recognition wasn't random, the officer knew him too well. And in that look, there was no respect. The boy whimpered in his arms. Reluctantly, he set him down. The woman pulled both children to her, shielding them, glaring at him as if he were the enemy. The officer's hand didn't move from his shoulder. "You shouldn't be here," the cop muttered under his breath, too quiet for anyone else to hear. "Not after what happened last time." The man froze. "Last time?" His throat tightened, heat rushing to his chest. He wanted to demand answers, but the sirens, the crowd, the eyes burning into him left no space. The officer gave a subtle nod toward the woman. "Walk away, or you'll regret it." But he didn't walk away. He stepped forward instead, planting himself between her and the patrol car pulling up. His choice was clear. He wasn't letting go again. The officer's jaw tightened. He reached for the radio on his shoulder, and in that instant, another voice rang out from the thinning crowd. A woman's voice, sharp, deliberate. "Ask him about the deal. Ask him why she lost everything." The man spun around, scanning for the source. A figure in a gray coat melted back into the shadows before he could catch a glimpse. The crowd gasped, whispers rising, the tension stretching thin as wire. His pulse roared in his ears. Two questions collided in his mind: what deal? What last time? The answers were close, too close, and then the officer's hand clamped on his arm. "You're coming with us." The officer's grip tightened, fingers digging into his arm. The man clenched his jaw, refusing to move. Around them, the crowd thinned as sirens echoed off the buildings, pushing people back. Cameras still pointed their way, hungry for scandal. "She deserves protection," the officer said under his breath, pushing him toward the patrol car. "And you should have stayed gone." The word struck like a blade. Protection from him? He forced himself to meet the woman's eyes, searching for denial, but she looked away, holding the children close. He twisted suddenly, breaking free from the officer's hold. Gasps rang out. For a heartbeat he was free, standing tall in the center of chaos, his suit dirted, his breathing ragged, but his stance unshaken. "No," he said, loud enough for the crowd. "Not this time. She owes me the truth." The officer lunged again, but the man stepped back, raising his hands to show defiance, not surrender. The crowd buzzed, torn between outrage and fascination. He had won a second of space, a small victory, but one that cost him. The officer's radio crackled, "Back up on the way." Time was slipping. The woman's voice trembled as she finally spoke. "Stop this. You don't know what you're demanding." Her words were low, but they carried. It wasn't fear this time, it was warning. Something in her tone cut deeper than her anger ever could. He swallowed hard, his pulse hammering. "Then tell me. Tell me why you're here like this. Tell me who they are." His voice cracked on the last word, but he didn't care. The silence that followed was suffocating. She opened her mouth, her lips shaping something fragile, something that might have been the first real answer, and then the boy tugged at her sleeve, whispering too loudly, "Mama, is he the man from the photo?" Every sound seemed to vanish at once. The man's chest clenched. The crowd murmured, eyes darting between them. The officer stiffened, his expression betraying recognition. The woman's face collapsed into terror. "What photo?" the man demanded, stepping forward. His voice carried like a challenge, like a plea. The boy hid behind her leg, but the question was already loose, hanging in the air like a fuse waiting for fire. The officer grabbed his arm again, this time with iron force, and hissed, "Walk away now, or you'll learn in front of everyone." The officer's grip was crushing, but the man didn't resist this time. He stared at the boy's frightened face, the woman's trembling hands, the silence around the word photo. His chest burned. Every fiber of him screamed to demand answers, yet he saw how the children clung to her, and for a moment, he hated himself for being the storm that terrified them. "Sir, step back," the officer barked louder now, trying to push him toward the patrol car. The man steadied his breath, mind racing. He couldn't win this in front of the cameras, not here, not with fear painted across their faces. He had to choose, yield and lose her again, or fight and risk shattering everything. He made his choice. "I'm not walking away," he said, voice steady but raw. "If she won't speak now, I'll follow until she does." His words drew a wave of murmurs from the thinning crowd. Some booed, others whispered, sensing a scandal deeper than what they saw. The woman's eyes filled with tears, not weakness, but fury. "Do you think this is about you?" she shouted, her voice finally breaking. "You think dragging me through the street will give you back what you lost?" The words cracked like glass. The officer moved to shield her, but the man pushed past him, not touching her, only standing close enough to feel the heat of her anger. "I just want the truth," he said. His voice faltered on the word truth, softer now, nearly pleading. That vulnerability stunned the crowd, and for the first time, she looked shaken, as if seeing not the man she feared but the one she remembered. It lasted only a second. The officer shoved between them, radio blaring. "Enough. Both of you will answer downtown." But before he could act, a black sedan pulled to the curb. The back door swung open, and a man in a dark coat stepped out, his presence cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Not here," the newcomer said, calm and deliberate, eyes locked on the man in the suit. "You know what's at stake." His voice was low, but it carried authority, and familiarity. The man's stomach dropped. He knew that voice. Years ago, it had promised opportunity, wealth, a future built on ambition. And now, hearing it here, tied to her, tied to the children, tied to the word photo, it threatened to crush him. "Get in the car," the stranger ordered. "Or you'll never know what she's hiding." The man froze at the stranger's command, every muscle locked in defiance. His chest heaved, his throat dry. The officer still had one hand on him, the crowd pressed closer, and the woman gripped her children as if any step might shatter them. "I'm not getting in your car," the man said, his voice hoarse. "Not until I know what this is about." The stranger's eyes narrowed. "You already know," he replied calmly. "The deal. What happened last time?" She paid the price, not you. The words hit like a blow. His pulse hammered. The deal. That was the same phrase whispered from the crowd earlier. He turned toward her, desperate for confirmation, but she shook her head frantically, warning him to stay silent. What deal? He demanded, louder this time. The officer tensed, the stranger smirked, and the crowd's phones lifted higher. It was turning into a spectacle. He felt the energy draining from him, the weight of years pressing against his chest, but his will kept him upright. The woman finally spoke, her voice breaking. You don't understand. They'll destroy you if you keep digging. They already destroyed me. Her words cracked something inside him. His fists clenched, not in anger but in helplessness. He staggered half a step, almost collapsing under the weight of not knowing, of carrying questions that seemed heavier with every passing second. The stranger's tone sharpened. You're tired. You look it. You don't have the fight you once did. Walk away, and at least you'll keep what you built. Stay, and you'll lose it all. The man's breath came shallow, sweat at his brow. He was losing strength, and he knew it. But as he looked at her, the woman who once meant everything, the children clinging to her, the officer still holding him like a criminal, something raw arose inside him. He forced his voice steady. If there's a photo, if there's a deal, I'll see it. I don't care what it costs me. The stranger studied him, then gave a thin smile. Then you should be ready, because the next time you see that photo, it won't just change you. It'll destroy everything you think you know. The stranger's words lingered like poison in the air. The man's body felt heavy, drained, but his mind screamed for clarity. He took a step toward the car, then stopped. No, he wouldn't be dragged like a pawn. He turned back to her. Tell me, he said, voice raw. Please. For a heartbeat, it seemed she might. Her lips parted, her eyes softening as if she could no longer bear the silence. But then the officer spoke, cold and decisive, she can't. Not in front of you. Not after what you did. The crowd gasped. His knees weakened, the ground tilting beneath him. What I did? He searched her face, desperate for denial, but she lowered her gaze, her silence slicing deeper than accusation. It felt like betrayal. Is that what you've told them? His voice cracked, anger and heartbreak colliding. That everything was me? She flinched but said nothing. The children pressed into her side, and for the first time, he saw fear in their eyes, not just of him, but of the truth itself. The officer shoved him back, and he stumbled hard against the patrol car, pain jolting through his ribs. Phones caught every second, the once celebrated man humiliated in the street. His fall was complete. But then, just as the stranger turned to usher her away, a small hand tugged at his sleeve. The boy. The same child he had pulled from the truck minutes earlier. His whisper was so faint only he could hear, the photo, it's hidden in her bag. Hope flickered, fragile but alive. His pulse surged again. There was still a way forward, still a piece of truth within reach. He met the boy's eyes, wide, conflicted, but brave, and nodded ever so slightly. Before he could act, a second squad car screeched into the street, doors flying open. Another officer shouted, "He's under arrest. Orders from downtown." The first officer stiffened, the stranger smiled, and the woman's face went pale. The man straightened, chest aching, sweat dripping down his brow. His freedom was collapsing, the truth still locked away, yet now there was one burning question that cut deeper than all the rest. Who gave the order? Two officers closed in, hands already reaching for cuffs. The man's chest pounded, his body weakened, but his eyes locked on the woman's bag. The photo. That single word burned through the fog of confusion, through the shame of the crowd's stares. He had no proof, no allies, nothing but that fragile hint from the boy, yet it was enough to ignite him. Hands behind your back, one officer barked. He lifted his arms halfway, then stopped cold, his voice cutting through the chaos. Check her bag. The words froze the air. The crowd gasped, heads turning, cameras zooming in. The woman's grip on the bag tightened instantly. Too fast, too sharp. A reflex of guilt. The stranger cursed under his breath, stepping closer, but the officer halted, his face flickering with doubt. The man pressed harder, his voice steadier now despite the tremor in his chest. You want the truth? It's there. She knows it. Her face flushed with fury, her voice trembling. Don't listen to him. He's lying. He always lies. But the boy tugged at her sleeve again, whispering something she tried to hush. The moment stretched thin, unbearable. The officer glanced at his partner, uncertainty creeping in. For the first time, the man saw cracks in their wall of authority. He had forced a sliver of choice into the open. That was his decision, to risk everything, his reputation, even his freedom, to drag the secret into daylight. But then the stranger moved fast, his coat brushing open to reveal a badge, not police, but something sharper, federal. This ends now, he snapped, flashing authority that silenced even the crowd. The bag stays closed. That's an order. Gasps erupted, confusion spreading. The officers hesitated, caught between commands. The woman clutched the bag tighter, her knuckles white. The man's pulse hammered, he was seconds from losing everything again. So he lunged. With a burst of raw strength, he shoved past the nearest officer and reached for the bag. The woman cried out, clutching it to her chest. For one breathless instant, his hand brushed the leather, close enough to feel the weight of the truth inside. And then a gun cocked. The stranger's voice cut like a blade, one more move, and you'll never see what's in there. The gun's click echoed louder than the sirens. The man froze, his hand inches from the bag, the weight of every eye pressing down on him. His chest heaved, sweat trickling down his temple. One wrong move and it was over, his reputation, his freedom, maybe even his life. Step back, the stranger ordered, weapon steady, voice like iron. The officers tensed but didn't interfere. They were caught in the same paralysis as the crowd, waiting to see if the man would break. For a moment, defeat pulled at him. He saw himself not as the powerful figure he once was, but as a broken man cornered in the street, stripped of dignity. His knees nearly buckled. Maybe this is the end. But then the boy's voice rang out, trembling but clear, "Stop hurting him." The sound cracked the silence. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The woman's face twisted, torn between rage and despair, as the child yanked at her bag, trying to free it from her grip. "Enough!" she cried, pulling it back, but in the struggle the flap tore open. Papers spilled to the pavement. A photo fluttered free, catching in the breeze before landing face up in the dirt. The man's heart lurched. He lunged, grabbing it first. His eyes locked on the image, grainy, but unmistakable. Him. Her. And someone else between them, arm extended in a handshake, the background filled with stacks of documents and cash. The date in the corner burned into his mind. The deal. Gasps exploded around them. Cameras zoomed in, flashes lit the street. The stranger cursed, shoving the gun back under his coat, already signaling to the officers. The woman's face collapsed into terror. "You weren't supposed to see that," she whispered, voice hollow. The man stared at the photo, the ground tilting beneath him. His entire life, his rise, his empire, suddenly tied to this single frozen moment. Betrayal radiated from the image, threads of corruption binding them all. Before he could speak, the stranger barked, "Arrest him." Before he says a word. The officers moved in, wrenching his arms back, the photo slipping from his grasp. He fought, but his strength was gone. The cuffs snapped around his wrists, metal biting into his skin. The crowd roared, some shouting for justice, others crying scandal. The woman clutched her children, trembling. And as he was dragged toward the car, his eyes caught one final detail on the fallen photo, a fourth hand, blurred, reaching into the frame. A signature ring glinting in the corner. He froze. He knew that ring. And if it was true, this was bigger than him, bigger than her. The explosion was coming. The cuffs bit into his wrists as the officers dragged him toward the car. The photo lay crumpled on the ground, its edges already smeared by shoes, but the image was burned into his mind, himself, her, the stranger, and that fourth hand with the unmistakable ring. "Keep him quiet," the stranger barked, panic breaking through his calm. That alone told the crowd more than words ever could. Phones lifted higher, voices rose. They weren't watching a criminal dragged away anymore, they were watching a cover-up unfold. The man stumbled but found his footing, forcing his voice to rise above the chaos. "Look at the photo," he shouted. "Look at the ring. You all know who that belongs to." Gasps spread. The crowd pushed closer. The officers hesitated, uncertain, eyes flicking toward the stranger. And then, from somewhere in the back, an older man shouted, "That's the senator's seal." The words ripped through the street like lightning. The stranger cursed, reaching for the photo, but the boy darted forward, snatching it up and holding it high for every camera. The woman cried out, torn between fear and relief, but she didn't stop him. For the first time, she didn't stop the truth. The officers froze. Orders or not, no one wanted to be the one silencing a scandal of that size. The stranger backed away, fury twisting his face, but the crowd surged against him, shouts of, "Expose it," and "We've seen enough," drowning out his commands. The man straightened despite the cuffs, his voice steadier now. "You tried to bury me. You tried to bury her. But the truth is out, and no one can stop it now." His words weren't just defiance, they were victory. The woman's tears spilled, but this time they weren't from fear. She pulled the children close, whispering, "It's over. They'll finally know." The boy looked at the man with something new, not just fear, but pride. The officers exchanged glances, then one of them stepped forward, uncuffed him in full view of the cameras. The gesture drew a roar from the crowd. Freedom. Vindication. The stranger vanished into the chaos, but it no longer mattered. The photo had done its work. The truth was bigger than any one of them now, and the tide had turned. The man raised his head, no longer the figure bent under accusation, but the one who had fought, endured, and refused to surrender. His voice cut through the uproar one last time, "They tried to silence me. But you can't silence the truth. Not anymore." And as the cameras flashed, as the crowd erupted, as the woman and children stepped beside him instead of away, the feeling was unmistakable. Not just victory. Not just freedom. But the start of something greater. He had fallen. He had been betrayed. And he had risen higher than before.